Good evening, everyone. Damien at Scout Guru. Hope you're well. I just want to take a moment to talk about a subject that I know that some of you guys struggle with. Do you ever have a customer come in and you just don't get a good feeling about them? You give them a quotation, after a consultation, you've had a good conversation with the customer, or maybe you've had a conversation with them over the phone or via email, and you just don't feel comfortable. Well, the chances are you're probably dealing with a red flag customer. That constantly referred to as red flag customers sounds derogatory. It's not intended to be, but that's the terminology that's used. And basically, a red flag customer is this kind of customer that you probably shouldn't be doing business with, for one of many reasons. They tend to end up being dealt with by companies that have a little less experience in the industry, who don't necessarily know to spot the signs. They're keen to treat as many customers as possible. They want to help people. When some of the more experienced clinics recognise these red flags and refuse to treat the customer then goes on to the next, and eventually they end up having a procedure. And invariably, they end up being a real handful to deal with. So what exactly do I mean by a red flag customer? Well, first off, a customer who has unrealistic expectations. So if you have somebody come in who they want it to look like real hair, so they want to grow it too long, they want to bring the hairline down too far, they want their side profiles really, really sharp, or just something that just isn't in their best interests. If you give them advice to the contrary and they don't accept that advice and want to proceed anyway, and you're not comfortable with what you're doing for them, there's a potential red flag. Ultimately, the customer might ask for a particular type of procedure, but ultimately you're the technician, you're the one who's responsible. Another example of a red flag customer could be somebody who is argumentative, rude, just generally very demanding and difficult to deal with. These people do come along. I mean, we see these all the time. I'm aware of customers turning up with knives in their pockets to procedures. I've had stories of customers turning up after freely admitting that they've had cocaine, or turning up drunk. We've known of some clients who get violent, particularly if they're upset about their progress because the progress isn't going the way that they're hoping it was going to, or as quickly as they're hoping it was going to. And we've also had customers who, at the 11th hour, try and renegotiate the price. So generally, customers that are difficult to deal with are likely to be ones that you're going to regret taking on at a later date. Another example of a red flag customer could be somebody who exhibits signs of body dysmorphia, commonly known as BDD, body dysmorphic disorder. BDD is, in essence, an obsession or a compulsion with a particular trait of your physical appearance. Customers like these can there are deep-seated psychological issues. It doesn't mean that you can't treat them. It just does mean that you have to be extra sensitive when dealing with them. Beneath this video, I'll post a link to an article all about BDD if it's something that you want to read up on. It's a pretty good resource for helping to spot the signs. Another example of a red flag customer could be someone who has already been to maybe 2 or 3 other clinics and had work done, but are still searching. Now, it's perfectly possible that their first 2 or 3 clinics may have been no good. Maybe they've not had a good experience. But if those 2 or 3 clinics, if at least 1 or 2 of them have been reputable clinics, and the customer is still bouncing from clinic to clinic without any real reason, then that's going to be a very, very hard client for you to satisfy. Another example could be a customer who is, during the consultation process, spending an awful lot of time, or a disproportionate amount of time, asking about removal. Now, it's perfectly fine to ask about removal during the consultation. You should. I mean, you need to know what's involved should the worst happen. But to be obsessed with removal, for it to be like one of the most important topics that are brought up again and again, can also be a red flag. Often you find with those customers is that lo and behold, they don't like the procedure, no matter how good or bad it is. So that's a customer that you want to try and avoid too. And I guess the final type of red flag customer would be a customer who has some kind of bloodborne disease, just purely a red flag customer, because it's obviously somebody who you need to make a judgment as to whether or not to treat them based on how comfortable you are doing so. Now, these red flag customers are difficult because if you're in business to make money and you want to help people, you're not in the business of turning people away. So when somebody comes along, these customers who have all of these things going on, quite often they're emotional. They can beg, they can cry, they can get angry. Generally a lot of these people can be quite emotional. So there is, it is very tempting to try and help, but you just need to just be aware that you're in business to do business with customers, but that doesn't mean any customer. There is such thing as a bad customer, and sometimes these customers can cost you more than they than they bring to the table, and you got to protect yourself. I mean, sure, you're probably going to be, if you're doing things the right way, you're going to be licensed, you're going to be insured. Doesn't necessarily give you total protection. If you are seen to be acting negligently, and that's that, which by the way isn't down to you or I to decide. That's if it were to go to a court, then ultimately somebody else would make that call. Then you could find yourself in real trouble. So just need to be really, really careful with some of these people that if you are going to take on one of these more difficult cases, then go in with your eyes wide open. If, for example, if you want to help somebody, genuinely want to help somebody, but you don't have a high enough level of experience to really cater for their needs, or if you feel uncomfortable, then seek the help or advice of a more experienced technician, and if necessary, refer the client to them. The bottom line is, it's not about doing as much business as possible. It's about doing business with the right customers, the ones that are going to enhance your business and help you get to where you want to be. I hope this has been of some use. There's a link to an article below about body dysmorphia. I'll also put another link to an article that's about generally spotting red flag customers and what you can do about them when you come across them. So hope that helps, and good evening.